used to tell me I was building a dream, and so I followed the mob. When there was earth to plow or guns to bear, I was always there, right on the job. They used to tell me I was building a dream, with peace and glory ahead. Why should I be standing in line, just waiting for bread? Once I built a railroad, made it run, made it race against time. Once I built a railroad, now it's done. Brother, can you spare a dime?
The Great Depression of the 1930s, one of the most devastating eras in American history. Environmental, economic, political, and social disaster led to the largest migration ever documented in this country. An estimated 2.5 million residents of the Great Plains were forced to leave their homes, pack only meager assets, and head west in search of work. My grandma, Virginia Foote Middleton, her husband, and 4 children were among that parade, so to speak. I, Julie Middleton, interviewed her at 97 years of age. Grandma takes us with her on that journey from Amarillo, Texas to Gresham, Oregon in 1935.
The 3rd of June, another couple. We sold everything we had, even our car.
Is that why you came with this other couple? Because
Yeah,
they had.
we had a touring car, and there was 9 of us.
What were the ages of your children when you left?
So Jim would have been 14 instead of 12. Barry was about 4, George about 2.
So you had 2 toddlers.
Yes, we did.
Oh boy.
Our trip was really rough.
I'll bet.
Some of it was fun. I furnished groceries.
The whole trip you had
I
furnished?
furnished all the
Did you
groceries.
really? Wow.
So I cooked breakfast every morning. We'd have a pancakes and buttered syrup and coffee.
The other woman, the other couple that you were with, was she ever able to help you out with
Not very
preparing
much.
meals?
The other couple was young, and they had a 9-week-old baby.
Oh, 9
And
weeks.
she cried all the way to Oregon.
The baby cried all the way?
And all the way.
Tightly rolled bedding was also taken on the trip. After a long day of travel, the beds were spread out in suitable spots along the road, slept in, only to be rolled up again each morning. While camped in southern Utah, the crew of 9 suddenly spotted a huge black cloud approaching. The cloud turned out to be 4-inch-long grasshoppers. Everyone piled into the hot car, closed the windows, and waited for the swarm to leave. A few of the insects even got in the car. They didn't live long. After arriving in Palmer, Idaho, they decided to stay for 9 days, picking peas for $2 per day per person. Beds were everywhere, along the road and around the fields. Grandma said there were people just like themselves from many different places, all eager for work. There were even 2 school teachers from Missouri, happily picking peas. People were generally friendly, sharing food items with each other.
You know, when people get in trouble, they're better.
Yes. I have to admit that, yes. That's true.
Not that I think we ought to all get in trouble, but
Right.
if you don't think that way.
Yes.
I loved her statement. When people are in trouble, they're better. Gives you a glimpse of her personality. They crossed the Oregon border, and eventually the weary bunch experienced the beautiful Columbia River they'd heard so much about. It was sightseeing all the way, Grandma exclaimed. After a month-long journey of roadside camping, Grandma and her family were all eager to arrive in Oregon, pick raspberries, and stay in a berry camp. Grandma lived to be 105 years old, wearing a smile till her last day with us. Back in Texas, during her childhood days, a neighbor described our heroine and her 2 siblings. There was Wallace, Jessie, and Virginia, aka Grandma. Whenever a task or a challenge was proposed, each child had their own response. Wallace, I can't. Jessie, I won't. Grandma, I'll try.
There were once hundreds all over Oregon. Men and women would live there during fire season, watch for wildfires, and report them. Most of those lookouts are gone now, but not all of them. You feel like you're on top of the world up there. Sometimes the views stretch for miles and miles in all directions. There's nothing quite like it. My name is Cheryl Hill, and I love visiting fire lookouts. My husband's name is Greg, and we've been geocaching since 2008. And when we learned about the Oregon Forest Fire Lookout Challenge, we knew we had to do it. We started the geocaching challenge in July 2011. And as we visited these places, I started learning more about lookouts and their history, and I grew quite fond of them. I decided I'd try to visit every standing lookout in Oregon. I love hiking and exploring and visiting new places, and this seemed like a fun challenge that would take me to some interesting spots. I created a website where I document my lookout visits. Some years were better than others. 2017 was a really bad summer for wildfires. I only managed 2 that year. Rebel Rock, that one burned just a few weeks after we hiked up and saw that one. So this is the book that Ray Kresick wrote, and it's an inventory of all the lookouts in Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and Montana. And he published this in 1984. There's a map showing all of the lookout sites in Oregon. Most of these are gone now. These are just sites that had a lookout once, maybe still do. Some of the lookouts have been turned into rentals that you can reserve online. I've rented 9 lookouts in Oregon so far, plus 2 in Montana. Staying in a lookout is a really special experience. I love watching the sunrises and sunsets, and of course the views are amazing. On clear nights, I can see so many stars because these spots are often pretty far from the nearest source of light pollution. It's also fun to see the birds, butterflies, lizards, deer, and other wildlife that pass through. It's very peaceful staying in a lookout, although if a storm passes over, it can be quite exciting. Right now, there are about 160 standing lookouts in Oregon. Sometimes a lookout is dismantled and removed because it hasn't been used or maintained in a while and it has become a hazard, or it collapses from neglect. If that happens and I haven't been there yet, that's one less lookout on my list. Other times they burn. At least 3 lookouts that I know of have burned down since I visited them. Not all of these places are on public land. There are some lookouts I won't be able to check off my list because they're on private property. There's 3 on the Warm Springs Reservation where the public isn't allowed to go. I have visited 53 so far. These places are in high elevation, so this is strictly a summertime activity, and I'll probably be working on this for a while. My favorite lookout so far is definitely Gold Butte. Volunteers from the Sand Mountain Society lovingly restored that one. They put a lot of work into it, and you can tell. The views are incredible, and it's just the loveliest spot. I've had a lot of adventures on this journey. Sometimes I wonder what I've gotten myself into. It's good that I have excellent map reading skills, because navigating the maze of roads to get to some of these places can be a challenge at times. And some of those roads are in really terrible shape. I've driven rough roads and overgrown roads. I have pinstripes down the length of my car to show for it. I've visited lookouts during hailstorms. When you've driven halfway across the state to check one off the list and it happens to be hailing, you still go for it if you can. At the rate I'm going, it's probably going to take me a while to finish Oregon, but when I'm done, I'd like to start visiting every lookout in Washington.
I've lived in Oregon all of my life and honestly love it here. I couldn't imagine living anywhere else. But I know plenty of people who have moved here from other states. I wanted to know why they moved here. So follow me as I interviewed the two people that I live with that both drove all the way across the country from Virginia to start their lives over in Oregon and what they love so much about it here.
I'm from Vienna, Virginia, originally.
I'm from Northern Virginia. It's like a suburb of Washington, D.C. It's like Fairfax County, in the town of Vienna. It's about 20 miles outside of D.C., southwest of D.C.
I left Virginia in end of September 2015. I want to say the 16th, I think. But anyways, yeah, that's when my best friend Allison and I left for our road trip to come out here. It took about 2 weeks, and we arrived on October 1st.
Well, I left on Valentine's Day, and then I think I got here on the 18th.
I honestly think it was just intuition for me. It was solid intuition. I knew I had to leave Virginia. I had outgrown that place. And something was calling me out west, but not to California.
Yeah, so I like one of the reasons why I want to move out here is to see the coastline, and then just to see like the tall trees and the type of forest out here.
Do you like how green it is?
Yes. Yeah, I like how green it is.
Oh man, by far the nature is my favorite. Like, that is my favorite thing. As soon as I got here, it's the first thing I noticed, and especially when I go out of town now and I come back, I'm like, wow, I'm so glad to be back. I breathe this fresh air, and the air just feels different here. I know when I go back to Virginia, it's very humid and muggy in the summertime, and then when I come here, it's like cool breezes, clear skies. It's awesome. Super green here. I love that. I love how green it is, and I love how friendly everyone is.
What is something you miss about Oregon when you visit Virginia?
The legal weed. 100%.
Portland, architecture and the gardening. At least where I live in Virginia, there is like just a really big lawn culture, and as opposed to like garden culture that you see in Portland. But there's like a lot of landscape gardening in Portland, but in the suburbs and Virginia, where I was from, it's like really more about just having a nice looking lawn and nice looking like pathway, maybe some shrubs and hedges to match like the windows and the window dressing. Where in Portland I see a lot more people taking advantage of the land that they have to practice like permaculture or just vegetable gardening or other forms of like edible agriculture, which is I think is pretty cool. It just kind of being like puzzling to my mom, like why I would want to like grow my own carrots.
I had the feeling of it's about time, and it kind of made me feel like I was going on another adventure, just another like festival or another road trip, except this time I wasn't coming back, and that honestly didn't really dawn on me until I think I left the state, and I had to drive through the whole state before I left it because we went south down to Atlanta first. So, but yeah.
Kind of like probably that feeling you get like first time you jump out of a plane, where it's just kind of like you know why you're up there, you know why you're doing this, but it's also like, why would you? You know, it's like totally going out of your way to do something that you have an idea of, you only have an idea of that it would be good for you.
What ended up happening was I started to realize, oh fuck, now there's two of us, and who is going to mother us both? So she wasn't the burden at all. It was the job of mothering. It's a huge burden to mother a child when your internalized mother is collapsed or nowhere to be found. I was constantly looking to find something strong and stable to root myself into. So when I was 12 years old, my older brother was murdered, and it left my mother and father in a complete state of grief. So as I was stepping out of my childhood and into my adolescence, there was no parenting, no guidance. Everybody was grieving. I felt like the people that I was supposed to run to for protection, I needed protection from. I was always in a fight or flight response. You know, my ears were like satellite dishes, always roaming for danger. There was endless amounts of humiliation, inappropriate punishment, screaming, yelling. It was a nut house. Once you've been treated in this way, your psyche becomes like a dark, tangled forest. So when my daughter was born, I felt like I needed a strong mother to lean into. I was split in half emotionally between my unmet needs and my child's unmet needs. Someone's sneering comments, their tone of voice, it was constantly triggering these old traumas inside of me. Nobody likes complainers, you know, so after a while, you know, not even complainers like complainers because you're cutting into all of their time. If I tripped over my soul back then, I wouldn't have even known it. That's how disconnected I was from my feelings. So when she started school, we were living in Manhattan. And by the time she was in second grade, I was so sick and tired of this New York City private school culture, the arrogance and the intellectual elitism. And I kept trying to regroup and readjust so she could fit in and that I could kind of fit in. It was like I was desperately trying to feed her soul from a culture that had no soul. And then my life started to feel like thin soup, and like there was nothing rich and sustaining. So one day, I just booted up and we hightailed it out of there. Pew! Like an arrow leaves a bow. There are very specific things that are required to heal this kind of mother wound. And, you know, you have to do the deep shadow work. And so I found a therapist who is also a shaman, and she sort of helped me to hold a torch into the darkest cave of my psyche. And then I started writing. And the writing became like a sacred portal into this rich creative life that was starting to emerge. And by going into that creative trance, it gave me the light and the warmth and the nurturance to get closer to the feelings that I had distanced myself from. And so the closer I got to those feelings, the stronger I became. I mean, all feelings want, really, are to be felt. And you can't heal what you don't feel. And all I really wanted was a shore for my feelings to land on. I mean, isn't that what a mother does best? You know, she's that shore that all those feelings can land on. I pretty much taught my daughter everything that I was not taught. Well, first of all, I didn't have to really teach her what's already in her bones, like how to create and how to love. She already came equipped with that. What I needed to teach her was what to look out for. You know, what a child needs more than anything is guidance. There's a big difference between knowing the rules of chess and knowing the strategies of chess. It's a whole other game. I taught her not to mistake arrogance for strength and narcissism for confidence. And that darkness often shows up offering sweets. And to know when things are starting to fall away and to be okay with that, because when you're in that psychic winter, the seeds of something great, they're falling into the frozen earth, but they're incubating. And in the right time, in the right season, that springtime will emerge again, and that the whole cycle ends in life, not in death. You trust your gut. And if someone doesn't respect you, you move on. You drag yourself out of any situation or relationship where someone is treating you with disrespect. That she has to learn to be patient with the things that she dislikes about herself. That desires make slaves out of kings and patience makes kings out of slaves. I taught her not to look to this world for her value. There's nothing good enough out there. It's all an inside job. All of her value comes deep from within her. That the beauty of her soul will shine through when she allows herself to be as she truly is. Look, I fought a hard, long battle, and I won. The way you fight darkness is you have to turn on the light. And the way you turn on the light is that you create something beautiful today that didn't exist yesterday. My childhood was yesterday's game, and I lost. And if I allowed myself to marinate in that wound and not get on with the making and the mending of my life, then I never would have become strong enough to be a strong, good enough mother for my daughter to lean into. The question is, are we going to make our challenges the gift or the curse? You know, and if I really listen with the ears that connect to my soul, she will always tell me that it's going to be the gift.
It's been such a long time. It's been such a long time.
Spring 2020 was pretty rough. COVID, quarantine, but I got lucky. And Lucky was pregnant. A week after she arrived, she gave birth to 5 beautiful little kittens. I couldn't get enough of watching them nurse, watching them sleep, watching their mama bathe them. They started out like little wet mice. They ate, and they slept, and they grew, and their ears got pointy and their eyes opened. They outgrew their cardboard box and moved into a kiddie pool. They learned to run and play and romp. They learned to fight, and tumble and tangle. I learned how to just sit still and watch them. She was such a good mom. I just loved to watch how she would lay back and surrender to her voracious little kittens. My therapist friend described them as an undifferentiated ego mass, which might be inevitable when you gestate in tight quarters with 4 siblings. They got so many likes on Facebook. They learned to eat their wet food and their kibbles. But nursing remained very popular. I think Lucky enjoyed it as much as her children did. Pretty soon, the babies outweighed the mama altogether. It was so great to see them learn from each other, how to puff up their tails, different strategies of attack. Figuring out how much there was to play with besides other kittens. And of course, learning the law of gravity.
My name's Randa Shahab, and I just finished my master's degree in global health. And prior to that, I have been trained as a physician assistant and studying Ashtanga Vinyasa Yoga since 1999. So the whole idea was that I was flying up to Calcutta to see what it would be like to implement a yoga program that would help with trauma. But you know, as I went around to all these villages, you see what's happening with daily life and people struggling to get 2 meals on the table. You're like, who's going to have the energy to do yoga as we know it in the West? So NISHT is this incredible organization. It's an NGO, grassroots movement in Calcutta, West Bengal, India. It's a family organization, and it was actually started by a physician in the early 70s. And started by him, meaning he saw, as he traveled around to the various villages, he saw the isolation that the women and girls at the time had after marriage. And he thought, the quality of life, we need to do something about this. So he said something to his wife, Pritalita Das, and Pritalita made it her life's work to start engaging women in community, and then it's moved into human rights and education and microloans. So it's really been sort of handed down from grandfather and grandmother to daughter. Mina Das is now the director. They've taken girls from working in the field and arranged for them to come to school with uniforms, hygiene kits, 2 meals, and the women with the microloans, you know, every month they put 50 rupees towards their daughter's education. So by the time they're 18, they're funded. May 20th, that Cyclone Amphan made landfall. So when I finally was able to connect with Mina, she said, oh, dear Randa, there's so much. Oh, 80% of the villagers have lost their homes. We have lost 4 children. All the COVID rations are gone, and all the agricultural fields are ruined. And what can I do to help serve you to get clean, safe drinking water? Sister, we need water ATMs. A water ATM is a system that gets set up where the pipe is, or if we have to drill a bore well, and it purifies the water, and then it actually becomes something that's sustainable in a community, but it becomes also a source of income for the community as it slowly gets adopted and people start to learn to come and get their water here and realize how the system works. We have a pilot project going, and sadly enough, when I asked for a water quality report, no. So we have to test that water to see, okay, what are we covering here? Like, when the fundamentals are there, when the basic needs are met, you know, that's really when we can start lifting people up. The Dalai Lama, I found this thank you that he'd written to the bigger community about how we have to view everything as connected and that we truly are one. Sometimes the road less traveled is the most abundant, or leads to the magic, or leads to that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. You know, you just make connections, and connections are, I think, definitely what give people the opportunity.
This is Cheddar. The likes on Cheddar's Tinder profile would include cat fountains, dryer sheets, and long naps in the sun. However, he would swipe right on vet visits. He visited 3 different vets in 3 months. After a 15-minute examination, the first vet found nothing. After a 60-minute evaluation, the second vet found sinusitis. She prescribed several medications, but ultimately Cheddar did not get better. After a nearly 3-hour examination, the third vet delivered the worst news: anemia, kidney failure, stomach tumor, and likely lymphoma. She gave him 2 days to live. Cheddar, however, had other plans. He decided that he was going to milk it for everything that it was worth. Cheddar's to-do list was actually quite long. It included sleeping in several cat beds, all his, of course, playing with dryer sheets in his blanket fort, cozying up on the couch by the window, chewing on the grass grown just for him, and napping outside in the late summer sun. We sometimes wondered if we were spoiling him too much. He had a cat fountain upstairs, but what if he was thirsty downstairs? He would wait patiently on the basement landing until he was carried down the stairs. He also would wait patiently to be carried upstairs. If he played with anything, it became his: a gift bag, a face mask, and all the dryer sheets he could ever dream of. We may or may not have done more laundry than usual, but not everything about Cheddar's final days was enjoyable. So many carrier lockups, so many car rides, so many hisses at the vet techs. The bills piled up fast. There were attempts at special diets, changes and additions in medications, and twice-weekly treatments at the vet. But Cheddar's comfort in his final days was more important than a full wallet. The end came fast, or it felt like it came fast. But it also seemed slow, so slow. Either way, it brought Cheddar peace. We cleaned up after he passed away. The process went too quickly. Afterward, the space felt too big. But at least now he can enjoy every dryer sheet.